If you're old enough, you'll remember the Atari 2600. It was one of the very first in-home game systems. And one of the most popular games for it was this game called Pitfall. It was where you went after this goal that you never actually reached, and you're a little Indiana Jones guy, and you just ran across the screen constantly for hours and hours and hours, where you jumped and swung on vines and jumped across alligators and ran over quicksand and things like that. Well, that's kind of like what my process of buying this rack was like. I'm going to tell you all about it on today's podcast. Welcome back to the GymCrafter podcast, everybody. My name is Tim. I am the head gym nerd here at GymCrafter.com, the website and YouTube channel that I built to help ordinary folks like you and I build home and garage gyms that we absolutely love. And for the first time in 10 months, I am sitting in a gym that I absolutely love. If you've been following along on the podcast or the website, you know that this gym has not seen a real big boy rack in that long. And what I mean by that is, for the first 6 months of those 10, I was doing a test. I figured I'd test out a bunch of the budget stuff for all of you guys out there who are on a budget, can't spend a ton of money on your gym. I wanted to see if there's anything out there that I could actually recommend and that would serve you well. And I wanted to put it through some use. I didn't want to just unbox it and shoot a review like most people do and then get it out of my gym. I actually used it for 6 months, and I got to tell you that that wasn't my favorite 6 months in my gym. You've seen the reviews on the RitFit stuff, which was probably the best of the bunch that I tested. You saw that some of the reviews and the major fitness stuff that I did, and then there was some stuff that I didn't even want to show you, some Macolo stuff, some GMWD. It was that bad, guys. So that was my joy in my gym for 6 months, is working out on that stuff, which wasn't all that enjoyable. The next 4 months, there was no rack here. And as you guys know, pretty much every podcast, I'm like, well, a rack is coming, a rack is coming. And a rack was coming. And I'd worked out a deal with a company to send me a really nice free rack. That rack was going to be a nice 6-post custom colored rack. They were going to send me all of their new latest greatest accessories that they're not even selling yet. It was going to be about a $5,000 rack. But over the course of that 4 months, I realized that, not only do you buy or get a product, you also buy or get the company that backs it. And unfortunately, communication with that company was really sketchy. I didn't feel confident about customer service. I'd heard other people having the same issues. And if you want to hear the whole story, go back and listen to the podcast entitled It's Not Me, It's You. And I tell the whole story there. But long story short, I called them and said, hey, I don't want your rack anymore. And that set me to a couple places. Number one, back to square one, sitting in my gym, and I hadn't had a real rack in 10 months. And I got to tell you, I really missed it, guys. I missed being under a barbell. But that also meant that I was going to have to buy a rack. So I figured, you know what? If I'm going to have to buy a rack, I'm going to do my research just like you guys would, and I'm going to look through all of the different options. I'm really going to do a hard look at myself and my gym and what I want for my training and what's going to work best for my gym. And over the course of doing that and ending up with the Fringe Sport Dane 2.0 behind me, I came across about 7 different pitfalls that I almost fell into, but I want to kind of go over with you guys so that if you're looking for not just a rack, but really any large purchase for your gym where you're spending a decent amount of money. Look, if you want to kind of just wing it on a $200 barbell, no harm, no foul. If it's terrible, no big deal. But you can't really wing it. I spent almost, after tax and accessories, I spent almost $4,000 on this, and that's not a purchase that I take lightly. That was not only more money than I wanted to spend, but it was about $4,000 more than I was planning on spending. So I really wanted to take my time, and I had been dreaming that whole 10 months. Now, I had started my research really technically when I started looking at those budget racks, because on day one of those budget racks, I'm like, okay, what am I going to get next? Because these aren't that great. So I don't want to be too harsh on them, but they're not great. So I really was daydreaming and thinking and watching YouTube videos and looking at all the racks were out there. So I was kind of getting my thoughts together on what I might like and really doing a lot of dreaming of what I may put in here once this was all said and done, and I was going to put another real big boy rack into my gym. So what I want to do today is I want to go over those 7 pitfalls with you guys to help you out and help you miss those pitfalls, and give you some examples of different times where you may run into them. And then also I want to go over a couple of the biggest lessons that I learned in this whole process that will hopefully help you buy the right thing when it's time to buy something big for your gym. And real quick before I hit point 1, if you want to see the review of this, I just posted it last week. So I did post a nice long, probably the longest review I've ever shot, the most detailed review I've ever shot of the Dane 2.0 went up last week. It's doing really well. You guys seem to really like it. If you haven't seen it and you're interested in the Dane 1.0, go back and check that out, because I'm not going to talk a ton about the rack. Short version is, I love it. It's not perfect. There's some big misses on it, which I go over in the review, but nothing that can't be addressed and nothing that I can't either work around or buy something to fix, which I've already done. So in the end, if you're thinking about this, go ahead and I think they're out of stock on both colors at this point. At the time I'm recording this video, make sure you pre-order and get in line because these things are selling like crazy. So, and with good reason. The other thing is anything I talk about today, including this, I do have affiliate links in the description below. As usual, it's very helpful if you use those if you decide to purchase. Not only does it help me out and pay for the time that it takes to make these podcasts and videos, but more importantly, it lets companies like Fringe Sport know that you like this channel and that they should work with me, because one of the reasons I spent $4,000 on this was because I did not get a discount. I did not get anything for free. I'm not a big enough channel for that for all the brands yet. And the free stuff, I spent that first 6 months on. So I decided to go with something that was going to be worth my time and worth my money. But anyway, that's why you want to use those. And let's get on to point number one. And point number one for me was, before I spent a lot of money, I had to take an honest look in the mirror. And that meant asking myself 3 really important questions that I think are important to ask yourself too. Number one, what type of training do I enjoy? I help a lot of people build home gyms, and they want to build a gym based on the training that they, I want to be the kind of person who likes cardio, so I'm going to buy cardio stuff. I want to be the kind of person who, likes CrossFit, because I know CrossFit people are really in shape. So, and they aren't those people. They aren't cardio people. They aren't CrossFit people. I read a comment recently on an Instagram page where somebody was asked, hey, what would you do different if you could start your home gym over? And he said, I wouldn't buy a rack and a barbell, which to me was like, blasphemy, right? But for them, they don't enjoy barbell training. They actually found out through building their gym, they really like machine training. So knowing what kind of training you actually enjoy is going to help you buy the right thing. And that definitely came into play when I bought this, for sure. But it should come into play when you guys buy big stuff as well. Because if you're buying something because you want to be the kind of person who likes that type of thing, but you're not, just come to grips with the fact that you're not, and buy things that you know you're going to enjoy. Because the single most important thing to fitness, the single most important thing to building strength, building muscle, losing weight, all that stuff is consistency. And the best way to stay consistent is to do training that you enjoy. And that there's really nothing more simple than that, or nothing more factual than that. And you gotta buy stuff that fits what you enjoy. And that pairs into the second thing, which is, what are you training for? What's your why? What I was training for when I was in my 20s and 30s, which was to put on as much muscle as I could, and I had a lot more at that point than I do now, is completely different than my training goals now, which is to keep up with my 5-year-old nephew, right? 2 completely different training goals. So the gear that I would have bought in my 20s and 30s is not the gear that I should buy now, and isn't the gear that I should buy now. But that was really hard for me to kind of come to grips with, is go, hey, Tim, you're not training to be world's buffest 30-year-old anymore, or something like that, because I'm in my 50s. And so that was another thing that was kind of a hard look in the mirror thing to do, but really important, and came into play a lot when I was buying this. The other thing, which for me was an easy question to answer, but I run into a lot of people who, when I ask them this, they're like, well, what do you mean? And that's, how long do you plan on training for? Now, for me, this is part of my life. I could no more give up training every morning than I could brushing my teeth every morning, right? So I know a lot of people are that way. A lot of you guys are that way. You're hobbyists, you're enthusiasts, you watch these channels because you like this type of content, and that's because fitness is a part of your life. But for a lot of folks out there, I think they're under the misconception of, well, I'm going to work a 12-week program, I'm going to lose 50 pounds and gain 30 pounds of muscle, and I'll be good to go. I can get rid of all this stuff, right? And it's a temporary thing. And I really think it's important to come to grips with the fact that what you're buying is for the rest of your life. So with that in mind, you should be buying something that can last the rest of your life. Back to that 6 months of budget home gym equipment, that's why I would never spend my own money on that. And unless that's all you can afford, and even then, we'll talk about that in a little bit, I still don't think that's what you should buy, because it's just not gonna last. And if you're buying something to train for the long haul, then you wanna buy nice, or you're gonna end up buying twice, right? Or buy once, cry once is another one that you hear. The other thing is, you might honestly say, hey, you know what? I got a wedding in 8 months. I just want to get in shape, and I'm not a workout person. I'm not going to work out after that. I know myself well enough. I just need something to get by. And in that case, you do buy one of those things I had in the first 6 months, right? But unless you can answer honestly that question of how long you're going to be keeping it for, you don't end up buying the right thing. And that leads us directly into pitfall number 2, is you have to buy for your specific training needs. If you know what you're training for, you know the kind of training you like, and you know how long you're going to be training for, then you can really get an idea of what the gear that you're going to buy needs to be able to do. And if you've been watching the podcast, you saw me, to shortcut this, this is probably not the rack. If I would have asked you guys in the comments to guess what rack I bought, very few of you, if any of you, would have guessed this. And there's a couple of reasons. And one of them is I went on and on and on and on about how all I wanted was just a 6-post rack. Give me a 3x3 6-post rack and a barbell like God intended. I just want to get back to that kind of training. I never even thought about buying a half rack. I talked a lot about not buying things with stuff in them, like this functional trainer that's built into the stain. And so when I sat back, I had to really look at how I train. And that led me to really kind of not necessarily eliminate a 6-post rack, but to add the consideration of a half rack and to add the consideration of functional trainers, which I'll cover more in a little while later in the podcast. But for me, the big one was, I asked myself, why are you so stuck on a 6-post rack? And the answer to that was, in my 20s and 30s, I lifted like an idiot. That's responsible for a lot of the injuries that I have. And my only goal in my 20s and early 30s was, how much muscle could I put on? I worked at a place that had an amazing gym, a whole hammer strength gym. I could work out for free anytime I want. I did a lot. I took every supplement under the sun. I ate like an idiot. And I really I was walking around with probably about 40 pounds heavier than I am right now. And by the way, that was miserable. But in the end, because I was training like an idiot, that meant I was always trying to lift as much as I possibly could. I was always going after my 1 rep max. Every week was PR week, right? I'm sure some of you guys can relate. And unfortunately, when you're trying to PR on squats every darn week or every time you're under a squat bar, here's what happens. And these are things that happen to me. You pass out mid-lift. You pull a hamstring. You roll your ankle, you blow out your lower back, and there's probably a few more that I'm missing. Well, the interesting thing about when that happens is, and I've been lifting inside of full cages for a very long time, since even before I worked there and started working out in powerlifting gyms, I'd always been inside of a full cage, and I never really thought about why until that first injury, which was the passing out. I know a lot of people say, hey bro, all you gotta do is just learn to dump a bar, which is true. You need to know how to dump a squat bar. Super important skill. Don't want to discount that at all. You need to know how to do that. Other people will go, hey bro, just don't put on the collars. You can just tip off the weights, which by the way is a stupid idea. Sorry for all you guys who do it. You're awesome. Your idea is not so awesome for lots of different reasons. But the biggest one is, if you pass out mid-lift, you're not doing this. You're going straight to the ground. And that is also the case if you pull your hamstring and you blow out your lower back and you roll your ankle. You don't have time, guys. You don't have time. And what a full cage does is it gives you the safety of being able to fall in any direction, and you are safe on the floor. You're passed out, but you're safe on the floor, and the bar has been caught by the uprights, the front, the rear, the safeties, whatever it is. So for me, one of the reasons I was just so caught up in having a 6-post rack was that safety aspect. The other one was, as a reviewer and also as just a gym dork, those big 3x3 6-post racks will accommodate lots of big accessories, right? Like a lot of you want me to review the Bulletproof, like the VTS, and then their leg developer and a bunch of stuff that they're coming out with. The problem is that all of the Bulletproof stuff is gigantic. It really is. And you need the extra room in your rack to accommodate it. I saw another one that just came out called a push-pull with these big, huge arms that look like they extend all the way across your garage that you can push up and down, which to me just looked like assisted dips. But anyway, some of this stuff is big, right? So I'm like, well, maybe I might want this or I might want that. But then when I stepped back and I said, okay, Tim, back to how do you train your legs was what brought me back down to earth. Was when I was younger, I trained legs by doing heavy squats. How I train legs now, belt squat, especially if I want to go heavy, leg press if I want to go heavy, hack squat if I want to go heavy, which is also on a machine, and then a leg curl and a leg extension. Like, I'm not putting a heavy barbell on my back anymore. The way that I train legs now at this age and with my training that I do is two things. Number one, I love to squat. I love to lift. I've really fallen in love with barbell movements and the human kind of movement patterns and moving your body under control and with good form. I could watch somebody squat with good form all day long. It's just so cool. So I try and work on that. I cannot do it as well as I should, but I'm working on it, right? So I like doing that. Well, you don't use a lot of weight when you do that. I use a medium amount of weight. The other way that I train my legs is I typically, unless I'm reviewing a program, I train in what's called the conjugate system. And the conjugate system has 4 lifting days a week. You've got 2 heavy days, and then you've got 2 what are called dynamic lifting days. And dynamic lifting days are basically you take anywhere from 30 to 45 or maybe 50% of your 1 rep max. You're doing them with as much speed and force as you can while trying to maintain control of the bar. I don't want to go into the whole conjugate system, but in other words, the 2 times I have a bar on my back, there's not a lot of weight. So then I thought, well, if I'm not doing that with leg day, and I'm honestly probably not going to buy any of that bulletproof stuff because I just don't, it's just not for me in my training. It's very cool stuff and I can't wait to use it at Home Gym Con. It's not something that's for me. So you take that first one, which is an honest look in the mirror, and then I look at how I'm actually training, and all of a sudden it's like, well, why wouldn't you look at half racks? And the other reason that a half rack appealed once I opened up that possibility was pitfall number 3. You know, there's an old adage of measure twice and cut once. Well, when you're buying big pieces of home gym gear, the adage should be measure 27 times and buy once. Because man, I'll tell you what, trying to buy something this big and this expensive sight unseen, which is what most of us have to do, was nerve-wracking, right? Like if you're lucky enough to live in Austin where you can go look at this in the Fringeport showroom, you live by one of the Rep Fitness showrooms, you live in Indianapolis where you can go to the Bells of Steel showroom, that's such an advantage because you can go put a tape measure on it and you can go and look at it in real life and see how big it is. One of the biggest pitfalls I ran into was in my brain, what 48 inches looks like in my gym is not what 48 inches actually looks like in my gym. It's just until this got here, even as I'm like, oh, it's a half rack. It's not gonna take up that much room. This thing is way bigger than I thought it was gonna be. So you wanna make sure that you measure as well as you can before you buy. And there's a couple of tips I've got for you that I ran into. Number 1, manufacturers, they'll put height, width, and depth on their website, but that's it. And man, it would be nice to know, okay, what's the depth with the front feet? What's the depth if you put these shelves on the back? What's the depth if you use side weight storage horns and your bumper plates stick off the back? What's the height to the actual pull-up bar and not just the height to the overall rack? These are all things that were different on Fringeport's website than what I find when I measure them here. Because while this is listed as I think like a 96-inch rack or 92-inch rack, the pull-up bar is only at 86 inches high. So that's what I need to know, especially as somebody who's tall, I need to know that kind of stuff. So it was hard, number 1. So manufacturers, if you're listening, take some time and put some more detailed measurements on your website. That would be really helpful. It's weird, some websites didn't have measurements at all, which was super weird. So I had to call. Now, nice side tip for you. Man, I learned so much by calling these companies just to ask for something simple like dimensions. Talk about a good taste of customer service, and we're gonna talk about customer service here over the course of this episode, but customer service matters, guys. And just after one phone call of, you know, if it wasn't on the website, they were like, well, sorry, I can't tell you, you're out of luck. I'm like, well, do you want me to buy your product or not? Like, well, we don't know what it is. And so, man, I don't wanna deal with companies like that. What if I actually need something meaningful, right? Other companies, like Body Solid, for example, their customer service department is right next to their showroom. So anything I needed them to measure for me, they walked over and they measured it. It was awesome. Same thing with the Fringeport people. They could just walk out into the gym and actually measure something for me. It's awesome. So huge difference there, but man, get as much of the measurement as you possibly can. Then what you want to do is come into your gym and you want to tape out 2 areas. I found this was super valuable. Number 1, tape out the actual footprint of the item, including all of the stuff that sticks off the side and sticks off the back. Tape that out exactly so that you can see, number 1, if you have room in your gym, number 1, and number 2, once you tape that area off, then tape off or mark off how much room you need around the machine to use it. And this was huge for me. So I have 24 inches on either side of this rack, and I love it. I don't know that I would recommend ever buying a rack and not having at least 18 inches on either side. That gives you room to take the weights off the storage horns, which, by the way, the side weight storage horns this is the first time I've actually stored the weights on my rack. I've always stored them someplace else. This is awesome, guys. So to be able to pull it off and then put it on the bar and pull it off the bar and put it on, it's great. It's one of my surprise favorite things about, it's not just this rack, lots of racks do it, but The reason I can do that is because I have room to work on either side. The other reason is, in my mind, I'm like, oh, 48 inches, I came in here and I eyeballed it. I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I can put a bunch of stuff over here. I can put a bunch of stuff on the back wall. I'm most likely gonna be getting the silverback dumbbells from Fringe Sport as well, as they just came out with their full set all the way like 5 through 100 pounds. And I'm like, oh, along this wall, I'll just put the dumbbell rack. Well, when I taped out the room I need to use it, dumbbell racks aren't this deep. So really, like I said, you need 18 inches. So that left 6 inches for a dumbbell rack. So I'm working on some solutions for that. But the moral of that story is, don't just measure the unit, measure the space you need to use the unit. Because even though most of these companies have return policies, there's no way I'm taking this thing apart, putting it back in the crate, and paying a freight company to back a semi up to my house and ship it back. I'd say 98 to 99% of the people who buy something like this, you're keeping it, even if it probably doesn't fit as well as it should. So, like I said, measure 27 times and cut once. And while we're talking about specs on a website, let's talk about pitfall number 4, which is do not fall into this trap of buying based on specs and price alone. I've got a few things to say about this that I ran into because I did 10 months worth of research on this basically. Number 1, you never want the cheapest of anything, guys. Just don't shop by price. All right, I don't care what some guy in a forum says of how wonderful the $199 thing on Amazon is. Just please don't buy by price. There's a reason it's the cheapest. You're gonna regret it in the long run. And the people that don't regret it just have never experienced something better. And once you do experience something better, there's no way you can go back. So just don't shop by price alone. Also, don't shop by price alone on the other end of that spectrum. Just because something's super expensive doesn't mean that it's going to help you build muscle any more than something that's less expensive. There's a middle ground that I think everybody should be in, and that's actually going to be the direction I'm taking the GymCrafter channel in going forward. Is I really want to focus on the stuff in the middle ground. I don't want to focus on the super highest price stuff. The middle ground stuff is what most of us can get, and that's what this Fringe Sport is. This is bang for the buck. This thing's awesome. I really couldn't find something else that even came close. There's a couple that came close, but nothing quite like this. And the bang that you get for your bucks is actually really, really good. I can't impress upon you how awesome and nice this rack looks. The fit and finish is fantastic. And I sent pictures of this to people that I train. And when one guy came in, he goes, this looks so much nicer than with the picture you sent me. He's like, when you sent me the picture, I was like, oh, you got a rack. But it's really nice, guys. And so bang for the buck is really where it's at. Don't shop cheapest, don't shop most expensive. Now let's talk about specs. First of all, like I mentioned already, one of the hardest things about buying this stuff is we don't get to go see it. So manufacturers know that, right? Manufacturers know that you can't actually go try their stuff. So what they'll do is they'll pad their specs, or they'll highlight specs that don't actually make a difference. Weight capacity is a really good one. And people will go, well, this rack's got a 2,000 pound weight capacity. It's because they went up and they gently set 2,000 pounds as close to the uprights as they could, and then held their breath for 30 seconds hoping their rack didn't collapse. And then now it says it's a 2,000 pound weight capacity, but if you were to drop a 250 pound barbell on it, it's gonna fold like a piece of origami. And so those specs can oftentimes not give you a good indication of whether the product is good or not. And I get a lot of questions from you guys where you go, hey, this bar says it has this tensile strength and it's $99, and this bar says it has the same tensile strength and it's $300. Isn't this one as good as this one? And the answer is no. So not only are the specs not comparable or really not indicative of the quality of the product in a lot of cases, another one is that a lot of times people will, like I said, they'll highlight features that don't actually do what they say they do. And I'm gonna be a little controversial, give you a hot take on this one. Aluminum pulleys, like you see on this guy right here, do not make your cable system pull smoother. Period. The material that the pulley is made of does not change how smooth the pull is. It's other things. A lot of other things. Here's the things that change how smooth the pull is. The quality of the cable and the cable jacket. The shape of the groove in the pulley. If you've got V-shaped grooves on a lot of stuff where it's pinching that cable as it pulls down, that's not going to be smooth, whether it's aluminum or whether it's nylon or whether it's plastic. The type of bearing that's in the pulley, how wide the pulley is, how big around it is. Just like on a bicycle. Imagine trying to ride your bicycle and it's got wheels that are this big. Not nearly as smooth as wheels that are this big. Those are the things that change the smoothness of a pull on a cable system. So just because major fitness advertises now that they've all got all aluminum pulleys, so the pull is smoother. No, it's not. It's just not. I've used systems where literally it's the same exact system side by side, one with nylon, one with aluminum, and that's the only difference. Cable width is the same, the track is the same shape, the same type of bearing. There's zero difference between the two because one is aluminum. And I know some people make a huge deal out of it, got to put aluminum pulleys on it. The issue is that aluminum pulleys sometimes come with the other stuff, but it's a great example of what I was talking about don't just shop by specs alone, because you're like, well, this rack cost Tim almost $4,000 after accessories and tax, and here's another one that's almost $2,000. It's got aluminum pulleys too. Isn't that the same? No, it's not. So just be careful about getting caught up into specs and features that the advertiser or the manufacturer is using to advertise to you to try to get you to buy their product. It is not a good measure of whether or not the thing is going to be good or not. It could not, but you can't go based on those wholly. Now you can a little bit, obviously, but it's not a great way to go kind of when you're doing your research as a whole. Let's move on to the next point, and that is know where to look to find companies that you can trust. And these days, for my money, you start on YouTube. Not only because I have a YouTube channel, but that's where I did almost all my research, right? Is I went onto YouTube and I started there. And I started with channels that actually use the gear for more than 20 minutes before they shoot a video. Unfortunately, there's some very large Instagram pages, there's some very large review channels on YouTube where literally that's their business. And this is my business, and I just do it differently, and I'm gonna give you some sites to go to for sure. But some of these larger channels, what they'll do is they'll have their crew unbox it, they'll get it all set up, they'll come in and look it over. And I think I kind of understand this a little bit because once you've done this for a while, you're like, I know, what do I not know about a squat rack? It's a bunch of metal poles. I should just be able to walk in and look at it and go, hey, this is what it is, and I'll shoot my video, right? And I get that. The problem is that it's not accurate, it's not helpful. So look for not only YouTube videos, but look for YouTube videos from channels who actually use their stuff for more than a day before they review it. And I have a list for you because I started just eliminating certain YouTube channels altogether from my research and really started adding some that I'd never even heard of before that I want to share with you guys. All of these people, from what I've seen, not only do a good job of reviewing, they have a good knowledge of the product, but they all actually train on the products they review for a decent amount of time, some of them for years, before they post a review. And there is no substitute for that type of experience and that type of review. And that's actually what I try and do here on GymCrafter. As you guys know, I'll always do an initial unboxing. I'll tell you it's an initial unboxing. In my review for this, I'm very clear. I had it for a week at the time I shot the review. And I'm like, I've only had it for a week, but this is what I think of so far. And I will come back over time and let you know what I think over time. How did it last? How did it stand up? You want to look for channels like that. So here's a list of, you're doing research or you're going to do research in the future. Here's the people, this is not exhaustive, but here's the ones that I use that I had a lot of good luck with and I really enjoy and I'm subscribed to. And these are my trusted resources on YouTube for reviews from people who actually use their stuff for a while before posting a review. So number one, obviously Gluck's Gym. Gluck, I think, is the number one player in the space right now. Him and Winnie, I talk to him back channel every once in a while. He's a good guy, by the way, real good guy. He is the same guy in real life as he is on the videos. And him and Winnie actually train on this stuff. He trains on this stuff for several weeks before he posts a review. In fact, we talk about it all the time. He's like, how does person X have a review out already? We literally just got them. Like, we just got it yesterday. How is there a review out already? And so he takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks sometimes to do it. I know the Vulture review that he just did, go check it out, it's a really good review. Him and Winnie trained on those things for weeks and weeks before he posted a review to make sure that it was a thorough review, and they show, right? So Gluck was always my first stop. Another reason is with the new gym that he built, he's actually got a ton of stuff there to compare it to. So not only does he have the thing that he's reviewing that he's used, he can actually logically and effectively compare what he's using to other products that are similar that he's used for just this, for the same amount, right? So it's a really valuable channel to watch. It's always where I started. Second one on my list is Gray Matter Lifting. Joe Gray doesn't review a lot of stuff, but the stuff he reviews, he uses for literally years. he cares much more about putting out good information and helping you guys than he does just sticking out a review every now and again. And also, he does a lot of comparisons. So if you like comparison videos, he'll try like I think he tried like 4 or 5 Nordic benches for a year and then posted an awesome review on which one of them you should buy. So real valuable channel there. Kurt over at the Kurt Locker, another one that doesn't really care about affiliate stuff or you clicking his links. He reviews stuff that he likes and he digs. You know, he buys it, he uses it, he likes it, so he puts a video up on it. But he's used it quite a bit. A couple more, another one, Jungle Gym Reviews, a newer channel, but man, not only great production values and enjoyable videos to watch, but really thorough reviews. Really like I said, enjoyable to watch because of how it looks, and does a nice job of actually clearly having used the details. You can tell by the details people point out. You know, I watched some reviews on this and they're like, oh, there's burrs inside here and this moves smoothly and the red's nice. It's like, well, you didn't have to use it to tell me that. So Jungle Gym does a nice job of, you can tell he points things out that it's like, oh, you actually used this before you shot the review, which is nice. There's one that I just stumbled across when I was researching this, which I really like. This guy. He's got a growing channel. Doesn't have a ton of reviews up, but Canada Steve's Underground Gym. I'm digging that channel quite a bit. So go check him out. Doesn't, like I said, doesn't have a ton out, but what he does have is really good. And you can tell again, he actually trains, and the aesthetic of his gym, mwah. I am not nearly as neat as Canada Steve. I wish I was, but man, that gym is beautiful. So go check that out. You've got Design Build Lift is another one. Does a lot of reviews of, I think, just like one specific brand, but does some other stuff that I think does a really good job. Garage Gym Life, John Greaves, my friend over there who runs that channel, another guy who him and his wife train on a daily basis. He knows more about training and training history than anybody else that I know. Knows the history of the equipment, why something is shaped how it's shaped. Pulls out like the most esoteric exercises that you can do on this gear. He just did a review of some handles, the Eclipse Grip by Matt Porter, and he's like, oh, you can do this exercise, you can do this exercise. And I was talking to Matt, and he's like, dude, I invented the thing and I didn't even think about doing those exercises. So that's another one where John is clearly using this stuff. Home Gym Hacks and Reviews is another one that I enjoy. I wish he put out more long form videos, but he's another one that does some really good comparisons after a good amount of use. So those are some channels to kind of get you rolling on research that I know that's not, again, I'm sorry if I missed you out there. I just went through my subscribed list and picked out the ones that I really are my go-to places for research. And then of course, hopefully you guys can turn to this channel. I want to ask you guys a favor, which is if you ever see me not doing that, call me out in the comments. If you ever think that I'm giving you a review based on just trying to get you to click a link, please call me out on that. Guys, you are my customer. You are the people that I'm responsible to. You're the ones who I make these videos for. I don't make them for Fringe Sport. I don't make them for Bells of Steel. I make videos on stuff that I have no affiliation with all the time because I just want to bring you cool stuff to legitimately help you build a home and garage gym that you absolutely love. So look for those types of channels when you're doing your research. Now, I did supplement that with some online research in places like Reddit, Facebook forums, Discord. I looked in a few places like that. First of all, man, how y'all gonna argue so much about gym equipment? This stuff is so cool. There's just so many arguments there. But outside of that, I really found that it's nice because it's what's called UGC or user-generated content. This is all posted by people who actually, I think, legitimately have all this stuff. So it's firsthand experience, so it's nice. You know, if you need a measurement, if you need a spec, hey, what's compatible? I love those sources for that stuff. I'm a little sketchy on them for reviews and buying recommendations for a couple of reasons. Number one, everybody's got their own opinion, and there are a lot of fanboys in these places, right? There's a lot of people who are like, Rogue or die, dude. Like, it's, okay, I get it. You like Rogue, they make good stuff. I see your t-shirt and your hat and your bumper sticker and all that stuff, but it doesn't mean that's the only option, right? And that's the case not just with Rogue. There are an awful lot of Mikolo fanboys for some reason in there, and I think every brand has their kind of group of people who are like, this is the best. And honestly, it's because unfortunately when you're looking in these forums and you're looking in these Facebook groups, a lot of times people are sticking up for what they bought. Because look, if you don't say that the one that you bought is the right one, then you're kind of admitting that you bought the wrong one, right? And nobody wants to do that. And even though they might not be thinking that overtly, that's really what's happening is people are, they're sticking up for what they have, right? And not necessarily giving you an honest, truthful opinion. And a lot of people, they don't necessarily mention the things that they don't like about their stuff. But anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I notice a lot of people, they'll tell you that whatever they have is the best. And then you look back through their previous posts, because a lot of these you can click on the person and look at their previous posts, and you see, well, that's because, you see a year ago, just bought my first squat rack. This Mikolo is awesome. And it's like, well, if it's your first and only, then I guess it is the best you've ever had, but you're not helping me as a customer buy something that's going to work for me. So just be real careful about this place. I think you guys, if you use a little bit of common sense, you can see that. But I think sometimes it gets so frustrating with all the different conflicting videos and conflicting information that you just you find somebody on a Facebook group and they seem reputable and they're, or like on Discord where they're ranked like the King Monster Gorilla poster of the year, or whatever. I don't know, I don't use Reddit a whole lot, but it's whatever those little badges are. And you're like, well, they must know what they're talking about, right? And honestly, they are just have nothing better to do than post on Reddit, really. It's all that badge means. But it's hard, right? So you find somebody like that, you're like, oh, I can trust this guy, you take their recommendation. All I'm saying is, I would rather see you use one of those YouTube channels because I know that you can trust those people. And really, don't just use one of those YouTube channels, use multiples of those YouTube channels. And as I mentioned at the beginning, all of those folks, the way, if you don't know, Gluck spends 80 to 100 hours on each video that he posts every Thursday. The 45-minute review that I posted on The Fringe took me a little bit more than that. Guys, it takes a lot to put out a quality video with B-roll and text and intros and music and all that stuff. It takes a really long time. So the way that we get paid for our time is that we hopefully do a good enough job for you that you click on those affiliate links. So what I would ask you to do is, even if it's not my channel, as you're doing research for stuff, whichever channel helped you the most, use that person's link. It's really, really important. It's also important because a lot of companies these days, as I mentioned in the beginning, are starting to eliminate affiliate relationships because they don't see the result. Like, you can run a Facebook ad and you can tell how many people clicked on the face, boom, you can see that. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they'll watch a video and then they'll call the company, or they'll watch a video and then just go to the company's website. And so the company's like, well, your video is not doing any good, even though, I'll give you a great example. Gluck, super sidetracked, but I think it's important to illustrate this point, is Gluck made a video about the Black Widow training gear cart for the Rep-In dumbbells. Not affiliated, nothing like that. Black Widow sold hundreds of those carts because of that. Now, how many of those people clicked through Gluck's link to go to his website? Almost none. So if we can't show the companies in some way, shape, or form that what we're doing helps you, and we rely on you guys to let the companies know that. So anyway, long story short, use whoever's links are most helpful. It's kind of a sore point for me that you're gonna hear us talk about a lot more and more going forward. But if everybody used the links, we wouldn't have to talk about it. And that goes into pitfall number 6, which I fall into on every stupid large thing that I buy, which is don't look at everything. I start off with a list that's literally every product that even kind of remotely looks like what I want to buy, because I don't want to miss out, right? Like, don't look at everything. Get yourself a list of, 8 or 10 or 12 finalists for what you're looking at, if that many. And once you have your list that you're going to pair, stop looking for more things to put on the list. I cannot tell you, oh my goodness, how many people email me and they're like, hey, Tim, what do you think about this barbell? I think that barbell is great. You're using it for this custom. That's a great fit. This finish is probably best for you. 3 days later, hey, Tim, I was in the Facebook group and they said to look at this barbell. What do you think about this barbell? I'm like, well, that does this and this and this, and here's why it would be different. Okay, 3 days later, hey, I was talking to my brother and he said I should look at this. If you keep doing that, A, you're never going to buy anything, and B, you're never going to be sure of what you buy. There's very few things in the home gym space that are the best. There's a few. Fringe Sport bumper plates, unequivocally the best bumper plates you could buy, period. But there's not a whole lot of things you can say that about. So just get a good group of options that you know you're going to be happy with in general and work to whittle them down from there. Trust me, from wasting hours of my life scouring the internet for every possible option that I think I might have missed. Don't waste your time. You're gonna find the ones that are right for you pretty early on in your search. Once you get that list, what you want to do, and this is kind of what I did, divide it up into large categories of pieces. And for mine, I grouped it into half racks and full racks. The reason I wanted to do that is there's no sense of trying to compare half racks to full racks. The first thing I needed to do is make a decision of which one of those formats I wanted, and then that cuts my list in half, and I don't have to look and research half my list, right? So the more big chunks you can identify and then not look at individual items, but just eliminate those big groups of products. So when I was looking at buying something and when I called Iron Bull and said, hey, I don't want the rack that you were going to send, I thought I was going to buy a Bells of Steel Manticore rack. And it's a 6-post rack. I really think that if right now, if you guys are looking for a good quality rack, kind of in that middle area I was talking about, there's a really good bang for the buck. The Manticore is a sleeper. I think the Bells of Steel, I think that Titan, and I think that the Osprey rack actually by Fringe is another one. Those are 3 good, just kind of really good bang for the buck racks. But I was gonna buy that, right? And honestly, if they'd had all the parts in stock, I'd be shooting a different video right now because I was gonna buy that, right? This was back before I had that honest look in the mirror and said, hey, Tim, how are you actually training? So I couldn't buy it. But what that made me do is step back. I did the first steps that we talked about in this video, and I'm like, you know what? I really don't need a full rack. I just don't. There's lots of good half rack options, and we'll go over what those options were and the finalists that I went through. But man, I eliminated most of my list that way, and it made my research a whole lot easier. And so since I went from a full rack to a half rack, I might as well right now explain why I went from I don't want any garbage inside my rack to having a rack with cables in it. And what that was is I realized that if I don't need to be inside the rack, the reason I don't like the Smith machines, and I don't like Smith machines at all, period, but that's another episode. That actually literally is another episode. Go back and watch that one. It's called Smith Machines Are Overrated. But since I'm not in the rack, I'm not tripping over this stuff. I'm working out, I'm doing my barbell workout in front of the rack, so all of a sudden it's like, well, what are you gonna do with this portion of the rack? And I go, well, it would make sense. If I'm gonna buy a half rack, A, I want it weighted down really well so it's stable, and B, why not use this space for something? And this seemed like the perfect idea because I have grown to absolutely love cable work and having a dual point functional trainer. I've got a Bells of Steel single stack, which works great. I still use it. I can't wait to show you guys the video on this. I've got some Matt Porter accessories on this thing that I'm not allowed to show you yet. It's awesome. But anyway, so why not, right? So that's why I ended up, just to let you guys know who are longtime viewers, why I ended up with a half rack with a functional trainer built into it is because by going through this elimination system and I eliminated what I wanted, I looked at my own training, that led me to know that this was a good solution for me. So let's talk about a couple of other big chunks. I eliminated the full rack and decided half rack with the functional trainer built in. So the next thing that I eliminated is I eliminated all entry-level brands. I already talked about my experience with those. For those of you who are still thinking about buying Major Fitness because, hey, gee, it looks neat, or lots of other comparable brands to that, I've mentioned most of them in this video several times. When I was a little kid, my cousin, I had 2 girl cousins in Colorado when we lived there, and we would go over and visit my aunt and uncle all the time. And this is back in the time where we weren't allowed to watch TV, there were no video games, so there was a playroom downstairs just full of toys, and their favorite toy was their Easy Bake Oven. If you don't know what an Easy Bake Oven is, it's this little plastic box. It's got an incandescent light bulb like this big. It's got an incandescent light bulb inside that gets hot, and you could cook little cakes in it. So we would go down and we would bake little cakes, right? So does it cook? Yeah. Could you cook in it? Like food that you could eat? Absolutely. If it was in a pinch and the oven upstairs broke and you just had to cook something, could you cook something? You absolutely could. But that doesn't mean that I want to, right? If we were allowed to go upstairs and make cupcakes and cookies in the big oven, we would have. And honestly, that's the comparison. This is the big oven nice upstairs in the kitchen, and those entry-level things are like working out on an Easy Bake Oven play school rack. They just are. So, I'm sorry if that offends anybody out there who has those. If that's what your budget could allow, I'm much happier that you're working out on one of those and not working out at all. I'm not saying that everybody shouldn't buy those, but what I am saying is that if you can afford, and even if that means saving up over time, I waited 10 months to get this. I'm thrilled with it. You can wait 10 months too if that's how long it takes to save up money for something nicer. Again, it doesn't have to be huge. You can go with a basic rack with no functional trainer. You can get into those really inexpensively. But buy something nice. So I eliminated the cheapo ones. I also eliminated the ones that maybe aren't so cheapo, but are what are called white labeled brands. And the 3 that I eliminated right off the bat are Vesta, Bolt, and the Dane 1.0. The Dane 1.0 is actually a white labeled product. What a white labeled product is you go to a factory overseas in China and they've got a bunch of different stuff that they make that's fitness equipment, and they go, which one do you want? We'll ship you however many. And you go, I'll take 1,000 of those. And you have the ability on a white labeled product to put some of your branding on it. You can make a couple of tweaks, but typically it's just whatever the engineers in China designed is what you're gonna get. And unfortunately, things that are designed by engineers never work as well as things that are designed by people who train. The nice thing about the Dane 2.0 is they took that white labeled product, They took the guys that work at Fringe Sport, which all of them train. It's one of the reasons I love the company. And they clearly changed a ton of stuff based on the people who worked out on it, gave them, plus some really good reviews. Gluck had a really good review on the Dane 1.0 that they took a lot of his feedback. And so I eliminated all those white label companies. Does that mean that Vesta makes bad stuff? No. Does that mean that Bolt makes bad stuff? No. It just means that I'm not interested in something that is bought off the shelf from somebody else who doesn't train. So I'm not going to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on something like that. So for me, one of the big groups that I just peeled off my assortment is that. So I eliminated the full racks, I eliminated the entry-level stuff, I eliminated the white label stuff. I also eliminated anything with a Smith machine in it, just because, like I said, I don't like Smith machines, so I just wanted to mention that. I really looked hard at the Force USA C10. I really like that, and if I had a much smaller gym where I had to fit everything into one rack, where I had to get, that sliding bench allows you to do leg work and leg press and hack squat right inside your functional trainer. It's got 3 different cable ratios on it. It's a fantastic piece. I eliminated that for a couple of reasons. Number one, as nice as that piece is, it is not for people who do barbell work primarily, and that's me. I love to do barbell work, and it's just those all-in-ones, they're not the best for barbell work. Barbell work is an afterthought. You buy those for all of the other stuff they do, which is great. If all you're ever going to do is use a Smith machine, they work fantastic. But for me, I eliminated those all-in-ones altogether. And Force USA, it kind of hurt because that was on my list for a long time. There's a while there where I really thought that a C10 was going to be sitting right where I'm sitting right now. It's a fantastic piece. I've got a couple reviews on it. Make sure and check those out if that sounds interesting to you. And lastly, I'm going to give you another hot take that people are going to comment about, but I eliminated anything that wasn't a 3x3, 11 gauge, 1-inch hole rack. Here's why. First of all, I have now at this point owned every flavor of rack size and steel gauge that you could possibly think of buying. And after having all of them for a while each, if you can afford it, 3x3, 11, now this is I'm not talking about the all-in-ones, right? The all-in-ones that have everything there, this doesn't apply to those. I'm talking about things that are built for barbell training, which are big boy racks like this, right? There's no Smith machine here. There's no crazy tons of stuff on it. It's just a rack for barbells and a functional trainer, right? So I eliminated anything that wasn't that, and here's why, aside from just having experience. Number one, I'm gonna get comments, I'm sure you're typing it right now, that, bro, 2x2 works just fine, I've had it for 10 years, it lasts great. Bro, 2x3 works great, and they do. They absolutely, they get you by. And they're not an easy bake oven, right? They're a little bit nicer. They're like a Lego. I'm just kidding. But they're just, the difference is there's 2 reasons why I would recommend, if you're gonna spend, and remember this is pitfalls in buying big expensive things for your gym. If you're gonna buy a rack and you've decided, hey, I'm going to train for a long period of time, then 3x3 is the industry standard. Now, whether it's 1-inch holes or whether it's 5/8 inch holes, I think you've got some wiggle room there. I'm not as kind of hardcore on one of those or the other. But 2 reasons. Number one, stability. And look, if you re-rack a heavy barbell on a 2x2 or a 2x3 rack, even if you've got it weighted down with plates like I do here, that rack is moving. And I have seen in real life people who miss the J-cups and that rack moves because people, when they're racking a heavy squat, they hit those J-hooks. And the rack moves, and now what do? Because they were barely, the reason they hit the J-hooks is they're already struggling with the weight. It is just, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And then it's a really big problem. And I've seen that happen with bench press as well, where they're getting that land, they're like, get it over the hooks. And they hit the front of the hooks, and the rack does this, right? Like, I can't have a rack like that. So that's number one. Number 2, if I want to buy new toys down the road, odds are all of those new toys are going to be made at the very least, or at least first, for a 3x3 rack. Now, most companies make things for 1-inch and 5/8. More companies make everything for 1-inch holes. So if I wanted a rack that was the most compatible for growth down the road, I've already been thinking about, if I want to turn this into a 6-post rack down the road, would I be able to do it? And I think there's a few ways to actually do that. I even think Fringe is coming out with a way to do that. So if I want to grow down the road, if I want to buy, some of that bulletproof stuff at some point way down the road, I want a rack that I don't have to replace. I want a rack where I can go and go, this cool new thing came out, I want to buy it, it fits my rack, right? So I thought that buying something like this was important, and I love companies like Fringe that do this. Now, one little tiny detail that I made a decision based on is I eliminated all true 3-inch by 3-inch racks, and here's why. This is a metric, so this is 75 millimeters by 75 millimeters on the uprights. In the website, it'll say 3x3, but import companies are typically 75 millimeter by 75 millimeter. So Fringe and Rep are the two most notable. Rogue and Bells of Steel are true 3x3. The difference is if I buy a true 3x3 and then Fringe or Rep come out with an accessory that I like, I cannot put their accessory on a true 3x3 rack because the post is wider than the accessory is. If Rogue or Bells comes out with an accessory that I like that I want to put on this rack, you can buy a little tiny shim spacer to fill up that little minuscule gap between the size of this upright. Long story short, there's not an accessory I won't be able to buy if I buy a metric based rack. Now that's a totally esoteric thing that only a big dork like me would be interested in, but just in case, when I'm talking about eliminating big swaths of things, that eliminates Rogue and Bells, which we'll talk a little bit more here in a second, but that's a big reason why I eliminated them. So there's the two reasons why I think that, why I went with something that was 3x3, 11 gauge steel, 1-inch holes. That's why I went with this. Now that's not going to be right for everybody, but I think for the majority of people, again, if you can afford it, if you can work it into the budget, even if you got to save for it, I think one of the pitfalls is, and this is something you saw in the forums a lot, you can get by with 2x2. 2x2 is fine. 2x2 is fine. It'll work. And look, again, if you're on a budget and that's all you can afford and you got kids, and I don't want to sound like I'm knocking people who buy those. I'm just saying if you got a choice, choose this over the small stuff. Okay, so I got my list of finalists, right? And I think I had 6 finalists after all that narrowing down and winnowing down and getting rid of groups, and I had to avoid pitfall number 7, which was overthinking the process from there. And again, this is something that I suck at. I'm terrible at this, guys. People in my life make fun of me. I have a good friend, Ray, who calls me the OCD mofo because he's been with me so many times when I do this because I just can't make up my mind. So in this one, I decided I'm not going to fall into that pitfall, and here's what I did. First of all, once I eliminated something from my list, it was eliminated. There was no going back. There was no, well, what about, well, let me look at that again. Nope, I eliminated it. It's gone. I'm not looking at it again. So that really helped when I made a firm decision not to do that. The second one was I eliminated people from the bottom up instead of the top down. What I used to do was I go, okay, I think I like this one the best. Do I want this one or this one? And it's like, well, I kind of like this one the best. That makes it much harder and takes a lot longer. What I did this time was I eliminated from bottom up. I said, which one do I like the least? Let's eliminate that. Like, it's so much easier to cut off those 6 finalists and winnow that down to the best 1 or 2 by eliminating the low fruit, the low guys, instead of trying to fight over who belongs in the top spot. So that was just a weird one. Maybe you think I'm weird for that, but that really helped me this time to avoid that pitfall of just agonizing and second guessing and not being able to pick. Is when you eliminate the ones that just don't work for whatever reason at the bottom, then they're eliminated. And again, once it's gone, it's gone. I didn't second guess it. The last one is, and I know there's a lot of people out there, some controversy about the Dane, so let's address that. A lot of people who bought the Dane 1.0 are super upset that a Dane 2.0 came out 8 months later. And I don't think you should be upset. So should Fringe have known about some of the issues on the Dane 1.0 when they brought it out? Yeah, absolutely. But they didn't. So they brought out a product and they sold it and everybody loved it when it was out and everybody raved about it except for Gluck, which is why I didn't buy it, by the way. If you have some time on your hands, go watch the Garage Gym review on the Dane 1.0 and then go watch the Gluck's review on the Dane 1.0 and you'll see why I recommended the channels that I did. And you'll see why I'm not sitting inside of a 1.0. Aside from it being a white labeled product, Gluck was the only one who was like, this sucks, this isn't good, this isn't great, probably shouldn't buy this one. Like tale of 2 videos, right? So just as an aside, if you've got time, go look at those, and it's a very eye-opening. But back to the 1.0 versus the 2.0, people should be upset. And maybe it's just because of what I did for a living. I sold retail electronics and appliances for a living for 30 years. And you can imagine when you sell TVs for a living, it's like there's a new one that comes out as you're on the way out the door with yours. And oh, by the way, it's less expensive now. So I just am kind of used, when I used to sell TVs, I would just tell people, I'm like, look, if you need a TV, because they would always go, well, is it going to be on sale for less on this date? Well, is there a better one coming out? When did the new ones come out? When's the new model year? And it's like, look, dude, if you need a new TV, then buy a new TV and buy the best one that's available right now. If you don't need a new TV and you can wait, yeah, something better is going to be out down the road and it's going to cost less. And you can use that same statement about gym equipment. If you need a squat rack, then buy a squat rack. If you don't need a squat rack, then I promise you better stuff's coming out at some point, right? If you don't need to buy it right now, there's something better. Now, for some of you, that means you're never gonna buy a squat rack, right? Because you're just kind of thinking about maybe upgrading what you have. And again, there's always something better coming out. But for most people, if you're building a gym or you've decided my old rack is no good anymore and I need to buy a new one, or the treadmill or any number of things that you're buying for your gym, just if you need to buy one now, look at what's available now and buy one now. And don't second guess yourself and don't worry about, hey, is something better going to come out? Is something going to be less expensive? I'm going to tell you right now, something better is going to come out and something less expensive is probably going to come out. Now with the gym stuff, it's going to be more expensive for a while, but at least the better thing is true, right? So I'm going to give you a funny story. So I sold my dad a TV. I sold him a Panasonic 42-inch plasma television for $2,200. And that was actually a pretty good deal back when he bought that. It's probably 15 years ago, if not more. And my dad's in a radio control flying club, so he always sent all of his buddies in the club into me to buy stuff. In 2 months, he talked about how much he loves his TV and how great of a deal he got. And man, you need to go see Tim. And so this guy, Ron, comes in and he's like, hey, I want the same TV your dad has. Can you take care of me? I'm like, hey, you guys know I take care of you. Well, I sold Ron the same TV 2 months later for $1,100. And 15 years later, I still get reminded about that by my dad on at least a monthly basis, if not more than that, because he is still pissed 15 years later. And then the moral of that story is just expect that it's going to happen and you won't be upset. Yeah, it's a bummer. You bought something, and look, even if the Dane 1.0 had been out for 3 years, there's going to be a large group of people who bought it 8 months before the new one came out. There's always going to be the people who bought it 8 months or 6 months before the new one came out, and you're always going to go, oh man, I should have waited 6 months. But just try if you can, be at peace. Look, they're coming out with what's called a Super Dane. I'm sure it's going to be taller and fit my tall, lanky butt much better. I'm sure it's going to have some features that I want on this that this one didn't have. And you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to go, man, I shouldn't have bought I should have. I needed a rack. I didn't have one for 10 months. So just as a tip for everybody, just be at peace with what you buy. It's going to make the shopping experience much better. And that's your 7th pitfall right there, is just be at peace with what you buy. So let's talk about the finalists, those 6 finalists that I narrowed it down to, because I know a lot of you are shopping for this right now. And I want to talk about those finalists, what they were. And I think each of these finalists is the right rack for somebody. So none of these finalists is a bad choice at all. They just weren't the right choice for me out of the finalists that I had. And number 1, which I haven't talked about at all, was just on a whim. I was looking at the Prime Fitness Prodigy racks. They make a functional trainer rack just like this. It's one of the best in the world that you can get. There's very few better. If you're gonna spend the money on a Rogue and you've got the money, just jump up to the Prime Fitness. It's gonna take a while to get, but you're gonna get a much better product. It's just, they're phenomenal. It was also $9,000. So the same configuration as this was $9,000. And I'm like, I talked earlier about if you're the guy who gets out of his Bugatti and rolls of hundreds fall out of your pocket, the Prime Fitness rack is for you, my friend. It is not for me, so I couldn't afford it, but I did look. And for those of you out there who want to be super bougie and buy the nicest thing available, the Prime rack is probably the nicest thing like this. And I will also tell you that American Barbell just announced 2 days ago a product just like this. They don't even have the pricing out yet. I'm guessing it's going to be close to that price, at least $5 or $6 grand, I'm guessing. So still wouldn't have been able to buy it, but there are some nicer options out there. But I had to eliminate that. And speaking of a little less bougie, I really thought this was going to be the first time I bought a Rogue, the Rogue functional trainer, the twin stack. Gluck speaks really, really highly of it. Everybody I know who has one loves it. I eliminated it for 2 reasons. Number 1, I really wanted to stay away from that true 3x3 rack that I talked about, just for compatibility issues down the road. But the bigger reason was, again, it was almost twice the price as this. So I couldn't justify, is it twice as good? I don't think so. I think you're paying for a couple of things. You're paying for the name, for sure. And you're paying for made in the US. And that's a complicated topic that I'll probably do a whole podcast on. But in short, I think Pete Keller, the owner of Fringe, put it really well. He goes, I import my products, but I employ a lot of people in the United States. They're just salespeople and customer service people and marketing people. Whereas somebody who manufactures here employs welders and machine operators, right? So they're both employing people in the United States. And I know people will argue with me on that, and I don't want to argue about it, because if you buy only made in the USA stuff, good on you, that's awesome. I won't ever try and talk you out of it. Just trying to explain why I am not willing to spend twice the price on just that. If it's a few more bucks, absolutely, I do that in lots of other products in my life. But in the end, that wasn't worth it to me. And I looked at it and I'm like, well, do I need gigantic shrouds on the, like that's the people make a big deal out of like the pulley system and the shrouds. And I'm like, well, does it pull, like, do I get stronger because of the shrouds? So I just couldn't justify it. And that's why I eliminated the Rogue. The next one I eliminated was the GetRx RX3. And this is one that I thought, this was one of my top finalists for sure. And over the last 10 months, I really thought this was going to be one of the ones that I bought, and I'm glad I got to see, not only did I see Gluck's review, who did a great review on it, go check that out if you're looking at the GetRx RX3, I was able to use it in real life. And first of all, the trolleys are cool, but not as cool as I thought they were. So for those of you listening only, the GetRx RX3 has a special trolley system with these arms with the cables on the end that allow you to extend the connection point for the cables in the rack out wider than the rack itself, and also go higher than the rack itself. And for me, being 6'6", the higher than the rack itself was very attractive. It was weird. They don't go nearly as high as I thought they would. Like the marketing material makes it seem like again, back to that measurement on paper being different in real life. When I went and looked at it, I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. The other thing is the wide part, the stretch from cable crossovers comes from your elbows. And your elbows can go back, even on my bells of steel where the handles are this close together, they're like 6 inches apart. I can get a great stretch on cable crossovers with that. Now the cable rubs against my arm, but I don't care. So for me, the width wasn't near as big a deal as the height. And honestly, the height, it didn't really go all that much higher. So it wasn't as big a deal to me. The other one was those trolleys are super heavy. Like it was a two-hand job to move them, honestly. And I wasn't happy with that. That really is what killed it more than anything for me, was how heavy those trolleys were. The other thing was, and I've learned this in my life, is I just have a rule of never to buy a first model year anything. I've gotten burned on a couple of first model year cars. For the longest time, if you bought a first model year anything from Titan, you got something you needed to put on Facebook Marketplace, to put it nicely. And I just don't want to buy a version 1. And when I trained on it, it's a little nicer than a V1, but you could tell just by training on it a little bit that there's a handful of things that need to be fixed. So I hope that they make the RX3 ecosystem work and that it's popular, because it seems like it's very popular. And I think it's going to meet a lot of needs because they've got some really cool configurations. Like if I needed a cable stack that mounted to my wall, that would be a great place to go. I didn't need that. I just needed a standard half rack. So the different configurations weren't all that appealing to me. The heaviness of the trolleys weren't all that appealing to me. And like I said, it didn't feel like a quite finished product. The other thing is, I will tell you is, and this has been hit and miss, and maybe it's just my luck, but I've had hit and miss customer service experiences with GetRx. Sometimes it's fantastic, sometimes it's awful, and I think they use call centers overseas, and I think it just depends on who you get. And I would rather not gamble on who you happen to get on the phone if I need help. So I eliminated the GetRx RX3, but again, I think that is the right rack for some people. Super cool. You're going to see, I guarantee you're going to see everybody making arms like that eventually, because that's a great idea. That left me with 3 finalists. 2 from Rep and 1 from Fringe Sport. Obviously, you know I went with the Dane, so let's talk about the 2 from Fringe Sport. Number 1 is the Aries 2.0. Guys, if you have the money, this is a phenomenally good rack, and the money is what kept me away. There's a couple other things that I actually like. I like rowing on this better, and go back and watch the review for the Dane 2. I talk about that a lot. There's some things I like better about the Dane, but there's some things I like better about the Aries. I just didn't like it $1,000 better. And that really is what it came down to. I would be paying $1,000 more, a little bit more than $1,000 more for the same configuration, for color choice and for center mount lat pull down and low row. And again, I actually like doing the low row on this better than I like on the center mount low row on the Aries 2. And as far as the pull down goes, I'm 98% sure I'm going to come up with a really good way to connect these two. And if I don't, I know Fringe Sport's working on it, and to be able to do a center mount lat pull down on this. And also, I have a bells of steel cable tower that goes up to 210 pounds that I can do pull downs on. I didn't have a need to spend $1,000 extra. For some of you, that is going to be the right rack. It is. I don't want to knock that rack. It is awesome, right? I didn't have any faults with it other than the price. If it had been, honestly, if it had been $500 more than this for the same configuration, I probably would have gone that route. I couldn't. Guys, I went from getting something for free that was going to be about $5,000 worth to spending money. So I was a little bit on the frugal side when I was doing this, but that's why I eliminated that. Well, that brought me to the next choice, which was the Athena. And the Athena is basically just like this, which the Athena has 2 single stacks on either side. It doesn't have the center mount, kind of low row and lat pull down, and it's less expensive. The issue is 2 things. Number one, I would have had to pay more money for it. It's like $500 more for the same configuration. And the second one was at that configuration, it had less weight on the stacks. You just can't get, now it's a 2-to-1 cable system, which some people like, but with the additional cable travel that Fringe added to the Dane 2.0 and the weight stack size just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So really overall, that's what led me to the Dane, and that's how I ended up with this. And hopefully in a very, probably, I know this was my longest review. I think this is probably, let me check the counter here. This is my longest podcast, so, but hopefully you hung with me till now. But that's not only the pitfalls of buying something big, but how I ended up with the Dane, and I kind of hopefully showed you how I use those pitfalls to winnow down the vast assortment of stuff. And you know what, while I was doing this, like I said at the beginning, I learned really two key lessons through this whole process. Number one, I completely understand now why customers who don't do this as a hobby and they just need to build a gym go to Dick's Sporting Goods and buy whatever they have there, or go on Amazon and buy whatever they have there that's got good reviews. I completely get that. I know what I'm doing, and it still took me forever to find something that I really, really, really liked. And man, I feel for you guys. So you're gonna see some changes here on the channel. I'm not gonna make any commitments as to what or when. Just know that I'm thinking about all the folks out here who go through that on a regular basis, all the people out there with analysis paralysis, all the people out there who are overwhelmed with options, don't know where to turn. I really think that we as home gym YouTubers have an obligation to you guys to help you make a purchase. Yes, this is for home gym dorks like myself who just like to watch videos about gym gear, right? Like that's a big group of us. But there's another big group of people who are watching these videos and listening to these podcasts who are just trying to build a home gym they love, right? That's, again, to build a home gym you absolutely love. And you know, a lot of our videos aren't making that any easier on you. So I'm gonna commit to you guys to try and up the quality of the video itself, the production quality, but also just the quality of information that will help you make a decision. The second thing that I learned is, man, a really nice piece of gear that you really like will make you work out more. It's not just about consistency. I'm already consistent, guys. Like I said, I could no more imagine not brushing my teeth and working out. But I genuinely, since getting this, I work out more and my workouts are better and I work out longer because I have this. Not because I have a new rack. Like if I had bought another Titan X3, which I loved and had for many years, I would have been like, cool, I got a rack, I can do barbell work anymore. I love working out on this. I love the stainless steel uprights. I love the pulley system. I love being able to do all the exercises that I can do, but I love just walking in and seeing it. Like I said, the fit and finish is something that doesn't come across on video, and that's true of a lot of products, not just the Dane 2.0. That's true of a nice treadmill, of a nice rower, of a nice cable stack. That's one of the reasons why the rep booth at Home Gym Con was so impressive last year. As cool as that Aries 2.0 looks on video, I promise you, when you get in it in real life, you're like, man, this is pretty nice, right? And that makes you love your gym, and it makes you love training, and it makes you healthier and stronger, and those things make you a better dad, a better brother, a better boss, a better employee, a better son. It just makes you a better person, and I cannot emphasize enough, I've said this a bunch in this video, if you have to wait and save up, please don't just buy what will get you by. Don't just buy the budget option. One of the biggest lessons I learned from doing this is, and look, is this a Rogue Twins? You know, would that be awesome too? Yes. I didn't have to spend top dollar to get something I really love. Just spend the time, avoid the pitfalls, and find the thing that you really love, and spend, you know, a decent amount of money on it so that you like it, you love it, you'll have it forever, you can pass it on to your kids. And that, my friends, is the end of the longest podcast that I have ever recorded. In fact, I'm losing my voice, so I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I can certainly feel it. So if you haven't liked the video by now, what is wrong with you? Like that video, do all the YouTube algorithm stuff. Content's gonna be spotty here for a little bit because I am updating the gym and I'm updating the studio and I'm changing some things around. Back to that, I want to improve the quality of things. So it's gonna require me to take some time off because, as I mentioned, these videos take a very long time to make and I can't do both at the same time. because it's just me. So, but anyway, I appreciate all of you viewers. I appreciate all you guys hanging on audio on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you happen to catch the show. And until the next podcast or review or whatever you tune in for, I'm Tim from GymCrafter.